Hey guys, this is Ezra here. I recently completed my manual swap on my 2001 Corvette, and this is basically going to be like a walkthrough video, basically summarizing what I did, my process, etc. I didn't record any clips of the assembly, but I did get some of the disassembly. And while I didn't show everything in video, I will go over everything in detail verbally. And if I get the chance, I'll try and take some pictures of like the custom wiring and drilling, etc. Overall, the swap was honestly pretty straightforward and simple. I really didn't have any major trouble with it other than the clutch pedal, which I will get into detail later when it comes to it. But yeah, overall, super fun project. Definitely worth doing. So much more fun. But yeah, I'm gonna time lapse all these clips because they're extremely long and very boring. So I'm gonna explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it in the process. So, all right. So right here, I am taking off my exhaust. This is what I did as my first step. This actually gave me a lot of trouble when I really don't think it should have. I'm using the Speed Engineering long tube headers, and their X-pipe kit ran to my stock axle back, but I have cut the mufflers off, so it's fully straight pipe pretty much. These gave me a lot of trouble. Like this video, I have it sped up. I think it's at 77 times speed, and this took about 40 minutes. Right here, this is where I am taking off my like mid pipes that go into my X pipe. These didn't give me nearly as much trouble. They're just clamped on. The next step in the process, I believe I popped my axles out. I did not record removing all the rear suspension components such as the A-arms and the shocks and all that, because that's just been documented so many times, so I didn't feel the need. If you are wondering about that, there are plenty of videos out there already, so go search those up, whatever you need to do. As you can see, I'm kind of running back and forth all over the place. This is when I was by myself. I did all this at my girlfriend's shop. Yeah, so I did not record any of the rear cradle disassembly. I did record us taking it out though, so y'all will get to see that. All right, right here, this is where I was popping the axles out. You can't really see this one too well because of the camera angle, but I just used a big pry bar and got it on the edge of the differential and wedged it between the axle, and they just popped right out. You can't do this unless your upper control arms and shocks are taken off and unbolted, because your axle will have nowhere to go. I kind of showed it pretty well right here. All right, this is where I began removing my torque converter bolts. I was using a PTC 3400 stall. Worked great. They're a great company to deal with. They're pretty local to me too, so I went with them. You have to move the torque converter inside the bell housing to get all the bolts off. There are 3 of them. Cannot remember what size bolt they are. Oh, I just showed it right there. But yeah, you have to rotate it with a big pry bar. There's these 3 prong looking things that hold the torque converter on, and you just get one off each at a time. Keep moving the arm and the torque converter as one until you get to the last one, then unbolt it, and then they'll spin freely of each other. You probably couldn't be able to do that with your hand. I'd use this big pry bar. As you can see, it just took some working at it, but overall wasn't too bad. For this job, I definitely recommend having a bunch of sturdy screwdrivers, big pry bars, small pry bars. I use those a lot throughout this, so yeah. This is a better view of these torque converter bolts I was talking about. Yeah, this is a much better angle. As you can see, it's like these little prong-looking things that hold the torque converter on, and I'm just using that pry bar to push it up out of the way. It took some prying at again, as I said, but not too bad overall. I'm not sure if this is how you're properly supposed to do it, but that's how we did it when we initially swapped out my torque converter and when we put it back in, and again when I did it this time. I don't know how most shops recommend to do it. Have no idea. Don't care. Got it out. Yeah, that's all it was. These are the electrical connectors that are on the transmission itself. That is the main transmission controller, so gotta get that unplugged. Next up, these are the ones on the differential. I believe that is the speed sensor. I think, I could be wrong. I honestly don't know. Yeah. This is where you will disconnect your transmission lines. This is only for the automatics. The manuals don't have that. It is a 5/8 wrench. There are like 2 nuts on it, but what you can do, you can just take off the big one and the whole thing will come out as one. There are 2 that are on there. This is not a good angle at all, but this car was like completely behind the ground. I'm standing under it straight up. And yeah, I couldn't get my phone up in there. My tripod did not go that high. These are pretty easy to get to, really not too bad at all. Just, yeah, take some work. These are what your transmission lines will look like when you get them out. These are also where the bell housing bolts are. There are 7, 1 at the bottom, 3 on the right side, and 3 more on the left side. They're really not too hard to get to. Just take some time. Again, it's super hard to get the phone up in there and show the angles, but I was using, for these, for the bottom ones, all you really need is a swivel, and then for the top ones, I had to get like a chain of extensions, swivels, whatever. But once you have all the tools, they're not hard to get to at all. You just have to make sure you have the correct tools. Swivels are your best friend, and also, if you have them, I would highly recommend 3/8 instead of 1/2 inch. That'd make it so much easier, but all I had that was battery powered was a 1/2 inch, so that's all I had. And also my air gun's 1/2 inch too, so couldn't use either of those really, but not too bad. That one right there is holding on the shift cable that has a nut over the top of it, and the bracket will slide off, and then you can get to the actual bell housing bolt, as you can see right there, what I'm doing right now. Yeah, once you get that off, the bracket slides out of the way, but you can't really get it out of the way until you disconnect the nut from right there on that is the gear selector, I believe it's called, something like that. It's the same size as your bell housing. You just pop it off just like that, super easy. That's what controls what gear you're in. I just threaded that back on there just so I didn't lose the nut. But yeah, once you get that off, the bracket will come right off, and then you can get your actual bell housing bolt off. Super easy. And right here, you also have 2 electrical connectors. These are a pain to get off, especially the bigger one, because they use this glue. It's like a pen sealer for preventing moisture, I guess. But over time, it'll solidify and turn into basically glue. So when we did my torque converter for the first time replacing it, we actually cracked that gear selector, and we like taped it up. It's very janky, but literally the connector would not come off. So eventually I could only get one of them off. We just cut the other one because for this swap, you do need a new harness anyway. So it's not like it's a big deal because, I mean, you're going to have to cut it up a few times anyway. So yeah, it just did that, made it easier, and then it came right off. That's most of the electrical connectors for the transmission end. You have to do them at the PCM as well towards the engine, but yeah, that's most of it back here. I believe there are a couple more that we will get to. Right here, this is where I'm getting to the top and final bell housing bolt. Side note, the one at the bottom is threaded in from the other side. They're all threaded in towards the engine, but the bottom one is threaded towards the rear end for some reason. Don't know why they did it like that. I guess so it couldn't like back out over time and rip your car apart. But yeah, this top one I had to use like 2 or 3 long extensions and like 2 swivels and a low profile socket. I actually used a 1/2 inch to 3/8 adapter so I could still use my 1/2 inch gun, and you're probably not supposed to just impact these out. You should probably break them first, but again, not reusing any of this stuff, so I just impacted it out, and I don't really see a reason why not to, so I did it anyways. The hardest bell housing bolt to get to is this one right here, froze it. It's at the top of the bell housing, and you have to completely move the wiring harness, but again, not too bad. Right here, this is where we are undoing these little brackets. I actually don't even remember what these are for, but I undid them. I don't know if you gotta do that. Oh, it's for that little vent line right there. Okay, sweet. Yeah, undo that. That holds your vent line on for the transmission. It just makes sure you don't have any pressure built up. But yeah, you gotta undo that. This is where I begin removing these subframe bolts. Do not impact these off. They're like pop riveted in, and you can break those off in there, and they're a pain to get out. This is where I began positioning the jack. I used a heavy-duty jack with a small one at the front and put like a big steel pad under the back to help guide it so it'd be more stable. Right here, we're just making sure everything is disconnected. There's nothing hung. You do have your brake lines that your axles have to go through. That's the main thing to check for. But yeah, you can just move those out of the way. That is the main thing. That's why the axles have to come off and you can't leave them in because the brake lines stay with the car. This is after we pulled the transmission out. I just took my torque converter off because I didn't want that to get damaged because that is a $1,000 torque converter. There will definitely be some transmission fluid that comes off, but don't worry about that. This is a torque tube cover panel. There are, I believe, 36 bolts. I think they're 8s or 10s. I cannot remember exactly, but 36 of them. They are super easy to get off. We just used a electric ratchet and an air ratchet to get them off. We're really struggling with that mid pipe. I left it on there because I couldn't get it myself, so we kept fighting it, but eventually we just we did get it off, I believe. I can't remember honestly, but yeah, there are 36 of those bolts that have to come out, screws, whatever you want to call them. But once you get those out of the way, your torque tube will be exposed and you can get that panel up out of there. Right now, your torque tube is resting on nothing, so we put a jack stand under the back to help support it. We are about to take off the torque tube to bell housing bolts. There are 5 of them, I believe. They're the same size as your normal bell housing bolts. Not hard to get to at all. Once those come out, your torque tube will be relatively free. There is something I did not record, but we were really struggling getting the torque tube out because we just kept pulling on it and pulling on it. But the automatic actually has a clamp that goes around the propeller shaft on the inside. It is a Allen key of some size, can't remember exactly what, but make sure you get that off or you will not be able to get your torque tube out. This is where we removed the torque tube after we got the clamp out, and we're fighting with it forever, so you just gotta keep pulling on it. Eventually it'll come out. Don't be too rough or you could mess up the splines on your torque tube. But yeah, after you get the torque tube out, the next step is to get your bell housing out on the engine side, and to do that you have to drop your headers if you have long tubes. I'm not sure about if you have the stock manifolds, but if you have long tubes you got to drop them down. What we did, we just we unbolted them and left the front bolts on, so they just like hung down lower. And then your bell housing bolts are 13s. You have to use like a swivel ratchet is what we use. They're 13 millimeters again, and the hardest one is the one on the top left, not the one at the very top. And there are 7 of those, and that one is probably the hardest one to get out, the one on the top left. We used that ratcheting wrench. It was 13 millimeter with a swivel head, and it came out pretty easy. After that, you can pull your bell housing off, and then after that, you can take your flex plate off. And the flex plate is held on with 6 bolts. I forgot what size exactly. And once your flex plate is off, your rear engine cover will be completely exposed. And you can go ahead and tap in your pilot bushing or bearing, whatever you use. I used a bronze bushing. A way to make it easier to get in is if you put it in the freezer overnight or for an hour, however long, just so it like shrinks down and it will go into that hole a little easier. What I used, I got a socket that was roughly the same diameter and just tapped it in with a hammer, just so I don't damage the outside of the bushing or bearing. And after you get your pilot bushing or bearing tapped in, you can go ahead and install your clutch. I used the McLeod RST. It is a twin disc clutch rated to like 800 horsepower, I believe. So far I have no complaints about it. It's not as stiff as like a typical 800 horsepower clutch, but it's definitely stiffer than a stock clutch. It comes with the flywheel, clutches, pressure plate, everything you need, and it comes with all the bolts too. The install instructions do come with it, and it also comes with a clutch alignment tool. You have to put that in there so you get everything lined up right, so your torque tube will go in fine. After you get your clutch on, there's a few things you can do. What I did, I went ahead and jacked up the back of the engine and disconnected the wiring harness for the automatic transmission. There are 5 plugs there under the battery. So you got to take out the battery and the battery tray, and it's 5 different connectors. Once you get those out, they should slide right out. What we ended up doing, we just cut them to make it easier, because there's a little test harness you will do to make sure the car starts before you do your like custom clutch switch wiring. So you can just go ahead and cut that if you want to. If not, you can fight with it, struggle, whatever. The harness wraps around to your ABS sensors at each wheel, so it'll go up over the engine into the battery tray, and then another wire runs off and it goes into each wheel hub, or near the wheel hub. Once you get that out, you can go ahead and start taking apart your interior. You have to take off the center console and the radio bezel. Once you get that off, then your shifter will be exposed, and you can take off the bolts holding your shifter assembly in. There is also a little cable for your key lock that locks your steering wheel. We just cut that little cable because, you won't need it anymore, so you can just tuck that back up under there, and you're good to go. There is also a hole in the carpet that you need to take out, and then you need to cut into the firewall for your clutch pedal and master cylinder. I ordered the whole clutch pedal assembly. It also comes with this little W-shaped bracket, but what I did, I just cut up the bracket into different parts, so instead of it going in as one bracket, it was 3 different bolts essentially. And I will post a picture of this little perforated spot in the carpet. That's literally exactly where you need to drill, so don't worry about messing it up. As long as you line it up with that hole in the carpet, you're good to go. After you get your clutch pedal assembly in, you can go ahead and mount your master cylinder, and that will go in. You push it in, then turn it 45 degrees clockwise. And when you're installing your master cylinder, be sure you orient it to where the clutch fluid reservoir is going up. And when it goes in, there's this little rod that comes off of the actual master cylinder. That's what goes into the cabin. That little rod has a hole on the end, and that mounts onto the end of your clutch pedal, so you can actuate it with the pedal. And there's also a little C retainer clip that goes on the end of that as well. After you get your clutch pedal in, you can go ahead and begin to put in your new wiring harness on the engine side. It'll mount up into all the exact same spots except for one connector. One of the female connectors will be left open because that's for your transmission control, and you don't have that anymore since you're switching over to a manual. After you get that in there, you will need to cut off one of the harnesses. You will need to cut off the one that has a purple and yellow wire up at the top. They'll be right next to each other. You'll cut that off, and then you'll plug that in and unplug one of your manual connectors. And we'll come back to why you do that later. But that is your test harness to make sure the car will actually start once you have everything back together. And once all that is done, it is time to go ahead and put your slave cylinder onto your torque tube. I'd recommend getting a speed bleeder for that too, because the typical way you would bleed your clutch is at the very top, and it is nearly impossible to do. Honestly, I don't know how you would do it without the speed bleeder. I use the Tick Performance one. You just run that alongside your clutch fluid quick connector line. I just zip tied them together, and I've had no issues with them. Just make sure you keep them off of your headers, because from experiences, they will burn, and the little coating on the outside will sear. So once you get that in, there's this little quick connector that connects your master cylinder to your slave cylinder. They're pretty hard to get together, but what I used, I just got some vice grips, held them down, and then pressed it together with my hand, and they went right together pretty easy. But it took some fighting for a little bit until I figured out that way to do it. And the final step before your torque tube can go in is you must get a hammer and hammer something out of the the torque tube tunnel. It is a little bracket that holds your shifter cable in place. You need to hammer that down flush with the body. I do not have a picture of it, but you will see it. If you do not hammer that down, then your shift linkage, that will like rub up against that and you won't be able to shift very smoothly. So just make sure you hammer that down. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat. It just has to be out of the way. Mine wasn't perfectly flat. It probably had probably half of an inch until it was flush with the body, but just keep beating at that. I found it was very easy if I got like some vice grips and just like wiggled it back and forth, and eventually I just pried it down. So yeah. After that, your torque tube is ready to go back in, and you can go ahead and mount that together after you put on your manual bell housing. The one I got is a 2-piece. That's the one I'd recommend. They do make full 1-piece ones, but the 2-piece one's a lot easier. Go ahead and get that in. And then you can mount your torque tube on. It takes a little bit of force just getting the splines lined up and everything, but just keep working at it, pressing it back in, and you'll get it. Just don't force it. Probably don't draw it in with the bolts either. That's what we ended up doing just because it was fighting us so much, and I've had no problems with it, but I would not recommend doing that. After you get your torque tube in, you can go ahead and install your transmission. There's a few ways you could do this. You could put your torque tube, rear diff, and transmission all in as one assembly. We ended up doing it piece by piece. We figured that would be the easiest. So after we got the torque tube in, we got the transmission in, and we left the shift rod connected to the transmission. So there's a little hole at the rear of the torque tube bell housing at the top where the like shift rod goes through, so it can go up into the car and you can connect your shifter to it. We left that connected to the transmission. We just positioned it, and then we mounted that in together. And you just got to make sure that you are feeding the shift rod in well. And it helps if you have two people, like one person to guide it at the front and somebody else to like actuate how up and down it is and forward and back. But again, goes in pretty easy. Just make sure your splines are lined up, and that makes your life a whole lot easier. So yeah. And then I forgot to say this. I put my differential with my transmission. I did both of those at the same time. But I mean, that doesn't really change anything. After you do that, you can go ahead and start connecting some of the electrical. Just make sure it's all ran together. I went ahead and installed a skip shift. I'm not even sure if you really need that since you'll have an automatic computer, but I went ahead and did it anyway. Just make sure there's no wires pinched or anything like that. After you get all that wiring connected in, you can go ahead and start positioning your rear subframe for install. It has these 4 like alignment pins, so it's, pretty much impossible to put it in the wrong spot. And you can go ahead and start raising up your rear subframe back onto the car or lowering the car down onto it, vice versa. Just make sure everything's lining up. Watch for those brake lines again that have to pass through the axles. And once you get your subframe positioned, you can go ahead and start tightening those 4 big nuts. They are 21s or 22s, I forget. But once you start tightening those down, I would definitely run them down with a ratchet. Don't use an impact. Like I said earlier, you could pop off the rivets inside, and that is no fun. But yeah, another way to prevent that is do each nut a little bit at a time. Don't do like one tighten fully down and then go all the way around. Tighten each one all the way down. Do a little bit at a time. That makes it a good bit easier and keeps tension on it so they can't pop out. Then after you get your main subframe bolts or subframe nuts connected, you can go ahead and start putting your rear suspension components back on, your control arms, your shocks. You can go ahead and pop your axles back into your differential. And I went ahead and did this. I changed my transmission fluid and differential fluid at the same time. There's videos on how to do that, but basically for the differential, there's a drain plug at the bottom. You crack that open, let it drain, and then close that, and then fill it. It's like 2 quarts or something like that of fluid. And then for the transmission, it's pretty simple. Again, there's a drain plug at the bottom. Open that, let it all drain out, close it, and then just pump it full until it starts to dribble out. That one's about 4 quarts, I believe. But yeah, after you do all that, your car should be just about ready to go. Put your wheels back on. I'm trying to think of anything else. There's really not much else to it. Finishing up your interiors, another thing. When you are installing your actual shifter itself, the rod will be on the torque tube in the car. You'll be able to see it from in the car, sitting on the torque tube pretty much. Get your shifter it's best to make sure your transmission is in neutral when you align it, or it might pop out of gear if it's not properly aligned. So go ahead and tighten that clamp down, and your shifter will slide right onto the torque tube, and you can mount it down with the hex nuts. And for basically the final touches of the car, you will get your test harness. Again, I'll link that down below to show exactly what it is, but basically you cut off one of the connectors and touch the two wires together to trick the car into thinking that the clutch is pressed down. And basically, if your starter bumps, the car will start. That's all it is. That's all we did. We didn't want to start the car in the shop and it'd be super loud. So we just bumped the starter, make sure it did that. After that, we got the wiring from the clutch switch. We could not find the actual like AC Delco pigtail, so we got the, I forgot what they're called, but they're like the little clamps that go on the prongs. We got those and we ran those to a kill switch that is mounted beside the fog lights and the trunk button. We just got all this stuff from O'Reilly's, and I believe we used 14 gauge wire, might have been 12. I can't remember exactly. I will throw up pictures of that. But we ran those two wires. We ran one up to the kill switch, one out of the kill switch, and then basically you're just trying to complete the circuit. And then the wire that goes up to the kill switch and then runs back out of the kill switch, you'll run that alongside your hood latch cable. And then the one that comes directly off of the clutch pedal switch, that'll also run alongside the hood latch cable. And then I just ran mine alongside the underside of the wiper cowl and then back down into the battery tray. And you have to pin it into the harness for the manual car, because to keep from having to like completely dig into the interior, you have to run those instead of just getting a interior harness for a manual car that already has those clutch safety switch wires routed. But I didn't feel the need to do all that. And the write-up I used on Corvette forum said the exact same thing. Said just run those wires and it'll work just fine. And that's what we did. It's running just fine. I will post pictures of that. I'll either go and throw them up in the video or post them down below. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. Overall, very easy swap. If anybody has any questions, feel free to leave them down below or message me, whatever. I am happy to help out. Or if you have any like specific questions on like where stuff fits and you want to see like what I did on my car, I will do my best to record that or take pictures and show you.